Well, that's an interesting question. It's not about me. I don't need any recognition. I'm just working to try to make the lives of cancer patients better, both through research, through clinical practice, and through participation in foundations like the B'nai Torah Foundation, which is a philanthropic nonprofit effort designed to reduce disparities amongst cancer patients worldwide. So I don't need any recognition or any kind of, acknowledgement. I'm just happy to have the opportunity to participate in these types of activities for the betterment of patients with cancer around the world. So I've spent much of my career dedicated to targeting just one specific oncogene in cancer called the human epidermal growth factor receptor number 2, or HER2 for short, and a lot easier to remember. This oncogene was discovered first in the mid-1980s, and then it was used as a probe to interrogate various types of human cancers in the laboratory, in Dr. Dennis Slayman's laboratory at UCLA, and I was privileged to be a fellow in Dr. Slayman's lab during my training. And Dr. Slayman discovered that the HER2 gene that encodes this so-called proto-oncogene, the gene can be amplified in many different tumor types. For example, in breast cancer, 20 to 25% of all breast cancer patients have gene amplification. In other words, instead of having just 2 copies of the gene, one inherited from your mother, one inherited from your father, a patient's tumor can have 10 or 20 or 50 copies of the gene, which results in overexpression of this proto-oncogene. And this gene and its protein product are a driver for rapid cell growth, rapid cancer spread to other parts of the body, and a poor clinical prognosis, including high mortality rates. And consequently, we developed a number of different therapeutic drugs that target the HER2 proto-oncogene product. And that has basically turned a negative into a positive. Now, HER2 positive breast cancer is one of the most favorable outcomes with the best results because of the new drugs that we developed that can overcome this problem of this gene that drives growth and drives spread of cancers. We can eliminate that with a number of new different drugs that hit this target. So it's taken many years. I've been at this for 30 years, and every few years we come up with a new approach. And in the past 5 years, we've had several brand new approaches to target this gene, and they've been highly successful, resulting in new FDA approvals in the US for new therapeutic drugs. So it's been very gratifying and very beneficial to patients. It's improved outcomes, including overall survival in many of the clinical trials, and so more to come. There will be new strategies in the future, some of which we're working on right now in the lab and in the clinic to try to make things even better in the next generation of new therapeutics. It is my second time in Nepal, very happy to be back. It seems like a lot has changed already just in 2 years since my last trip, but it's very exciting to be here. This time I had the opportunity to go up into the mountains and hike a little bit on some of the trails and see some of the natural beauty that's here in Nepal. And as always, it's been a pleasure to interact with all of the local people here in Nepal. Everyone's been so kind and so nice to me, so welcoming, so hospitable. I hope to return the favor if any of you ever come to California. I hope to return the favor for any of the Nepalese that I've met. I'd be more than happy to show them around my neighborhood south of San Francisco if the opportunity should arise. The main reason is because of the B'nai Torah Foundation, which I'm privileged to be on the board of that private philanthropic foundation. And consequently, the mission of that foundation is to overcome disparities in cancer treatment around the world. And Nepal is a good example. Of course, we have our own disparities in cancer treatment in the US. For example, where I live, near San Francisco, if you go to the south section of Oakland, California, in southern Alameda County, the population there does not have resources or access to the best medical care, including cancer screening, cancer prevention, cancer treatments, and consequently their cancer mortality rates are probably the same as any other country in the world that has disparities in cancer treatment and outcomes. And so this is not unusual to let's say, Nepal or India or other countries. We see it in our own country as well. But here in Nepal, in the state that we're in Janakpur, it's the largest state in Nepal, over 6-7 million people, I believe. And there are no medical oncologists in the entire state. That's impossible to imagine in any country. And consequently, that should be a fairly easy problem to overcome. And in order to do that, we've done a lot of studies here locally to try to find out what would be a game changer in this state near Janakpur in Nepal. And the idea is to build a new hospital. Because with that kind of infrastructure, with state-of-the-art technologies like electronic medical records, state-of-the-art imaging techniques like CT and MRI imaging, PET scanning perhaps in the future, radiation therapy capabilities, surgical operating rooms, et cetera, with all those basic infrastructure needs met in a new hospital, that will attract many new physicians to this area in order to practice oncology at all levels in many different areas of cancer treatment, not just medical oncology, but also surgery, radiology, imaging, screening, you name it. We want to have the facilities available to attract the best talent in Nepal and from other countries as well to come and practice here. And that way we can erase some of the current disparities in cancer outcomes right here in Nepal. And we have strong support from philanthropic donors who have been very generous to provide support to the foundation. We've had close discussions with state and federal funding agencies here in Nepal and even in India. We met with the Indian ambassador 2 days ago. And it looks like since we have close proximity to India here in this state, there's enthusiasm to try to support the foundation's efforts to build a new hospital, because not only Nepalese would be able to take advantage of this opportunity for better cancer screening, early detection and treatment, but also people from across the border could make use of the same facility. And I'm sure there's opportunity for training programs as well for medical students, residents, fellows who are in training, who are interested in cancer medicine, could come from multiple countries in order to get their training at a new state-of-the-art hospital such as the one that we envision. I first met Dr. Binay Shah at a conference in Idaho, in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Dr. Shah was practicing oncology in Idaho years ago. And he decided he would have a medical education conference right there in Idaho for the local oncologists who may not have the opportunity to travel to the larger national or international meetings that are held annually in the US. Some practitioners are just simply too busy to be able to leave their practice to go to Chicago, to go to the American Society of Clinical Oncology meeting, for example. They can't take a whole week off to attend that meeting. So Dr. Shah had the vision to bring the education to them instead of having to travel around the country or around the world to try to seek such education. And that conference became very successful, and I was fortunate to be invited to give lectures at that symposium multiple years. And so over the years, I learned about the foundation, learned about its mission, wanted to become involved, and so I asked Dr. Shah what would be the best for me to try to make a contribution. Obviously, I made donations in the term of monetary donations to try to help the foundation, but more importantly, I think, is being able to donate time. And consequently, I became a member of the board just a few years ago, and that's been very productive. I participate in the weekly tumor board conferences right here in Nepal, virtually. On Sunday mornings at 8 o'clock, I can log into Zoom and see the cases that are being discussed that we're seeing that week right here in Janakpur, and offer help and suggestions, maybe a literature search There are multiple doctors from the US on the same call from different disciplines. They have different areas of expertise, maybe surgery, maybe radiation therapy and medical oncology, such as myself. And so we can give a comprehensive set of recommendations for the best treatment available here in Nepal for the patients right here in Janakpur. And for example, we just saw one of the tumor board patients who I had seen online just a few weeks ago. I had the opportunity to meet that patient here in Janakpur just yesterday and get an update on her progress and her condition. And I made some suggestions again that the doctors put in the medical record to try to help her progress even more after I learned the update. And we made some adjustments in her treatment just yesterday. It was very convenient because I happen to be here. It's so nice to meet people in person instead of little images on a laptop screen on a computer. It's much better to be here firsthand. So being able to donate time like that for me is very rewarding because you can see that it has immediate impact and hopefully will make the lives of patients better quickly. Actually, I would say that it's probably not true that cancer treatments in Nepal are not as effective because they can be. It's perhaps ironic that some of the simplest diagnoses and treatment for cancer are still the best. If you have a diagnostic pathologist who can make the diagnosis of which cancer a patient has, and if you have a good surgeon who can operate on such tumors, sometimes surgery alone is curative if you catch cancers early enough. Moreover, there are simple adjuvant postoperative treatments that you can also use that are available in Nepal. For example, most breast cancers express estrogen receptor. 70% of breast cancers have that drug target. There's an inexpensive generic drug that's been available since the 1970s called tamoxifen. It's cheap, it's easy to take, it's very well tolerated, has some side effects, but they're usually easy to overcome, and most patients can take the drug for 5 years or even 10. It's 1 pill a day, and that reduces the risk of breast cancer recurrence dramatically in randomized phase 3 trials and improves overall survival of breast cancer. That's available today in Nepal. You don't need the latest, most expensive, high-tech new drugs. You don't necessarily have to have that in order to have a big impact compared to what the current state is, where we don't have access to even simple things in this jurisdiction. So I think small steps can have big impacts. And I could go right down the list of the most common cancers and tell you the same story with treatments and medications that are currently available that we currently aren't using, but that we should be. And it should be simple to integrate those into current clinical practice, but it's just we don't have doctors who are experts in cancer medicine locally in order to take advantage of the simple tools that we have that are highly impactful. Breast cancer is often hormone driven. So, hormone excess, estrogen excess is a known driver of promoting the emergence of breast cancer. So, for example, women who start having their menstrual cycles at a very young age have a higher risk of breast cancer because they have monthly cycles of cyclical estrogen and progesterone secretion every time their ovaries cycle with each monthly period. If you have late menopause, the same is true. If you have late pregnancy, the same is true. If you're going to have a family, it's protective to have children when you're young. That lowers the risk of breast cancer. So does breastfeeding, because while you're breastfeeding, you don't have monthly period cycles and fluctuations in hormone levels. Exogenous hormone use. In the US, we used to give Premarin and Provera to tens of millions of women a year to alleviate menopause symptoms. It turns out that caused breast cancer in randomized phase 3 trials, and consequently, overnight, tens of millions of women in the US stopped those drugs, and the incidence of breast cancer for hormone receptor positive breast cancer fell in the next couple of years. All this is published in the New England Journal of Medicine. So other examples of risk, alcohol is a known risk factor. The risk factor isn't high in the case of breast cancer, but it's measurable in large epidemiology studies. There's no lower limit, so minimizing alcohol. Obesity is another strong risk factor for breast cancer, so diet is very important. Exercise is protective for that same reason. So there are many factors that increase breast cancer risk that are modifiable, that you can actually control, but there are some that are probably not controllable. Radiation exposure, we all get ionizing radiation from background radiation, both from the Earth and also from the rest of the universe. There's always going to be cosmic background radiation. But radiation to treat thyroid cancer or Hodgkin's lymphoma, those kind of treatments can increase the risk of breast cancer. So if a patient has a previous Hodgkin's disease and had chest wall or chest internal radiation, those patients need to be screened more carefully for breast cancer so that if they do get it, we can detect it early. Screening is another important aspect of breast cancer early detection, because the disease can be cured if it's discovered early enough. If it's discovered very late, when it's already spread all over the body, it's not curable. It's still treatable, but perhaps not curable at that point. So early detection is really important. And so self-inspection, self-examination can detect breast cancer at an earlier stage than not doing something so simple as take a look in a mirror, feel the breast tissue, maybe during a shower once a month, for example. Those are simple things that don't cost anything, that with education alone we can do. Mammography will take time. I mean, we will bring that with the new hospital, but it's not available yet, but it will be in the near future. And when that becomes available online right here locally, that's going to have to be a very big educational initiative and a change in medical practice to make sure that all women have access to mammographic imaging. Again, that type of imaging is actually inexpensive and it's very safe. And so that can also save lives. And it's been shown that mammography reduces mortality of breast cancer. That's been shown in multiple studies. So eventually that will need to be integrated along with self-inspection and doctor examinations. It's good for women to see their doctor at least once a year, because they'll get a breast exam, they'll get a pelvic exam, they'll get a pap smear. They can do a lot of things to detect cancer early so that if, God forbid, they should get it, they can get it at a curable stage where it's not going to have any long-term impact. Once they finish their treatment, they'll be back to normal, literally. Breast cancer survivors there are millions of them in the US right now, and when you see them on the street, you wouldn't know that they were ever sick, because after treatment for breast cancer, you can go back to a completely normal and active life, fortunately. There are a lot of steps that can be taken. The first, as I mentioned, is simple patient education. And so now, as more and more people have access to social media, online access, television coverage, magazine, print, newspaper coverage, things like this interview. I mean, anything you can do like this to increase awareness so that patients know what to look out for. Simple signs and symptoms of cancer are easy to spot. It's usually a lump that just comes out of nowhere and doesn't belong in any particular tissue. That needs to be checked out by a doctor, and many patients just think, oh, it's a pulled muscle, maybe it'll go away, maybe it's an infection, they'll take some antibiotics, which won't work against cancer, obviously. So just simple education, and now that we have greater outreach with cell phones and online media, social media, et cetera, it should be much more rapid to get the message out compared to the old days where you had to learn it, just through word of mouth. Also, schools are a great source for education. In junior high and high schools, there's no reason why this couldn't be a one-day effort once a year for each grade level to learn about early signs and symptoms of cancer, so that they could recognize it not only when they grow up, but they can recognize it in their parents or their grandparents or aunts and uncles. They could enlighten their own families because they learned some simple lessons at school. So there are a lot of simple, easy, and cheap things that can be done to get the word out. To raise awareness. That's the first step, clearly. There are very little gaps at the level of the physicians and their medical education. Ironically, you'd be surprised to learn that as I travel around the world, including here in Nepal, the physicians are as up to date as anybody else in the world with the latest publications, the latest presentations at national and international meetings, because all these are available now online. Plus, many of the doctors do travel outside of Nepal to the European Society of Medical Oncology or the American Society of Clinical Oncology. There are Nepalese physicians who attend those conferences and learn the most cutting-edge, state-of-the-art oncology possible, and that's what we're hearing at this conference. This conference is no different than a conference in California, because the same data are being reviewed with the same level of scrutiny and the same level of judgment that's required to make clinical decisions. Now, in some cases, some of the drugs that are under discussion, even at this conference, may not be available locally in Nepal yet, but they're coming. And the physicians here are so excited about the new technology that they've already learned about it, whereas doctors in the US, they're comfortable in their own practice. They don't necessarily go to meetings. They don't look at all the online information that's available to them. And consequently, they're not practicing cutting-edge oncology, even in California, whereas you'd think it would be automatic. Well, it's not. And so, ironically, the level of interest is even higher outside the US in some cases than it is in the US. And I find that as I travel around the world, and I've been to all 7 continents, I find that the oncologists are usually up to speed intellectually on all the latest data. We all read the same journals. That's the bottom line. And we can all interpret data independently. And I think that's great. That's a real change because of the electronic age. Back when I was young, I had to go to the library and make Xerox copies of journal articles. That took a lot of time and a lot of work. You don't have to do that anymore. You can get it on Google or on PubMed or on any number of other online services, and you can get the results instantly, and it's free. So it's refreshing to see that all of us, right around the world, US, ex-US, Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Australian outback, Nepal, India, Asia, it doesn't matter where you are, you have the same information. That levels the playing field. The best and brightest oncologists in the field all have the same access and the same level of knowledge at this point. And that's really refreshing and exciting. So the presentations at this meeting have been the same as I would see in the US. Really no exception. They're outstanding, they're cutting edge based on the latest data presentations at the big meetings and the latest publications in high impact journals.